The invitation, expanded version, it was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind of morning that didn't feel rushed or heavy. The sky was clear, pale blue, with thin, harmless clouds slowly drifting above the city. The sun wasn't too strong, and the air felt gentle, just cool enough to make a person want to walk slowly and think. The streets weren't crowded. The usual noise of honking cars, loud voices, and hurried footsteps was missing, as if the entire neighborhood had decided to stay calm for one day. On this peaceful morning, Ayan walked slowly toward a place that had become familiar over the past few months, the old public library near the corner of Camille Street. The library wasn't big, and it wasn't modern. It had no glass walls or polished interiors. It had faded, cream-colored walls, wooden doors that creaked a little when you opened them, and tall shelves filled with books that smelled like paper, dust, and time. There was a warm silence inside, the kind that invited you to pause and breathe slowly. Ayan liked coming here, not because he was an avid reader or a student preparing for exams, but because this place didn't ask anything of him. It didn't judge him, didn't expect him to perform, didn't remind him of what he hadn't done yet. It just offered space, stillness, and a chair to sit on. That was enough. He walked in, greeted the librarian with a soft nod, and made his way to the far end of the room. There was a corner near the window where sunlight fell in a quiet line across the wooden floor. A small table and 2 chairs were placed there, simple, unpolished, and usually empty. That's where he sat most days when he came to think, read a little, or simply sit with his own thoughts. Today was no different. Ayan carried a book with him, a small paperback about self-improvement. He wasn't reading it with deep focus. He just flipped through the pages, stopping at any line that caught his eye. Most of the time, the lines felt repetitive. Believe in yourself. Take control of your time. Stop being afraid. They were words he had read many times before. They sounded good, but they didn't do much. They felt like suggestions from someone who didn't know what hesitation really felt like. Still, he kept turning the pages, hoping something might make more sense today. The room was still. The only sounds were the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional turn of a page by someone in the distance. Ayan placed his book on the table and looked out of the window. Outside, a few children were playing in the park across the street. A woman walked her dog along the footpath. A cyclist passed by, slowly. Life, as usual, was happening gently. As he looked out, someone sat in the chair across from him. Ayan turned slightly, surprised. No one usually sat there unless the library was full, and today it was nearly empty. The man who sat down was around his late 30s, dressed in a simple white shirt and black trousers. No tie, no jacket, no visible signs of status or intention. He carried nothing but a small notebook in his hand. His presence was calm, not loud, not imposing, just there. For a moment neither of them spoke. The stranger placed the notebook gently on the table between them. Then he looked at Ayan, not with intensity, but with still eyes, like someone used to listening before speaking. "Give me 23 minutes, the man said quietly, "and I will erase your weakness." The sentence wasn't delivered like a challenge. It didn't sound like a sales pitch, a motivational quote, or a strange riddle. It was just said plainly, like someone asking for a glass of water. Ayan blinked. He didn't respond immediately. He wasn't shocked, but he wasn't sure what to make of it either. "What do you mean?" Ayan finally asked, his voice low, almost matching the calm of the man's tone. The man didn't explain himself. He didn't start a long talk about power, strength, or secret techniques. He simply leaned back a little and said, "You walked in here carrying something. You didn't speak to anyone, but I saw it. Not on your face, but in the way you sat, in the way you handled that book. There's a hesitation in you, a kind of silent doubt. It's not shameful. It's not wrong, it's just present. I don't need to know your life story. Just give me 23 minutes, and I'll help you see it clearly, and then let it go." Ayan didn't know whether to laugh or walk away, but instead he just stayed seated. He didn't feel threatened. The man wasn't trying to prove anything. In fact, there was no pressure at all. The library, with its steady silence, made the whole moment feel oddly natural. Ayan looked down at the notebook. It was closed, but it had a small circle drawn. On the cover in ink, nothing else. No name, no title. Why 23 minutes? Ayan asked. Because that's enough, the man replied. You don't need hours of lectures. You don't need to be fixed. You just need someone to help you see what you're not looking at. After that, your mind does the rest. Ayan tilted his head slightly, considering the words. He wasn't someone who trusted easily, but he also wasn't someone who believed that every stranger was a danger. Something about this moment felt different, not magical. Just clean, quiet, clear. He nodded slowly. All right, Ayan said. You've, got 23 minutes. The man smiled softly, not a big grin, not a knowing smirk. Just a small, simple smile of acknowledgement. He opened the notebook and turned it toward Ayan. The first page was blank except for 3 words written neatly in the center. Thoughts, habits, environment. This is where we begin, the man said, tapping gently on the page. Not with strength, not with success, but with the roots. Ayan looked at the page. No pressure. No promise. Just a quiet invitation to look inward. In that peaceful corner of the library, with no audience, no camera, and no noise, the first minute passed. Not in transformation, but in attention. Real change, Ayan thought, might not begin with force. It might begin with this, stillness, honesty, and a person who is willing to sit with you, not to fix you, but to guide your eyes to the places you never noticed. And just like that, the time began. The real question, expanded version. The notebook lay open between them, still displaying the 3 quiet words that marked the beginning of something simple but meaningful. Thoughts, habits, environment. Ayan looked at the page for a long time, not because he didn't understand the words, but because he was trying to feel what they meant in that moment. They weren't foreign ideas. He had read them in books, heard them in talks, and even thought about them during late-night walks when the world was asleep and his mind was busy. But today they felt different. They weren't just topics for thinking anymore. They felt like soft entry points to something more personal. The man sitting across from him, Rafik, as he had quietly introduced himself, had not said much since the initial request. He hadn't explained the plan. He hadn't tried to impress Ayan with clever phrases or grand advice. He simply let the silence stretch for a bit, allowing Ayan to become present. Not in a dramatic way, but in a grounded, normal way. Just 2 people sitting in a library on a regular morning with nothing forced, nothing hidden. Can I ask you a question? Rafik said finally, his tone still soft, as if he was merely offering a suggestion. Sure, Ayan replied, now more settled. What do you think your weakness is? Rafik asked, without looking up from the notebook. Ayan didn't answer immediately. He didn't want to say something just to sound wise or deep. Instead, he let the question sit for a while, like a cup of warm tea that needs a moment before it can be sipped. After several seconds, he responded not with certainty, but with a calm kind of honesty. I hesitate too much, he said. I think too long before I speak or act. I doubt my decisions. Even the small ones. Rafik nodded gently, as if the answer was neither surprising nor unfamiliar. He didn't react with concern or judgment. He simply wrote it down in the notebook. Under the word thoughts, anything else? He asked, without pushing. I second-guess myself. I replay conversations in my head and think of what I should have said or done differently, Ayan continued. I get stuck in the middle of things, not because I'm lazy, I just stall. Rafik wrote again calmly. There was no sense of urgency in his movements. No rushing. Just the steady flow of listening, understanding, and recording. After a moment of stillness, Rafik looked up and said, Let's look at where that hesitation comes from, not to judge it, but to trace it. Most people try to break their weaknesses, like breaking a wall, but hesitation isn't a wall, it's a fog. And fog doesn't break, it clears when you notice what's behind it. Ayan listened quietly. The words didn't feel like advice. They felt like soft observations. He nodded. Rafik then pointed to the 3 headings again. We'll look at each part of this. Not to fix anything, but to notice what's shaping your hesitation. If you understand the shape of it, it starts to lose its grip. He turned to a new page in the notebook. At the top he wrote, "Your internal voice." He looked at Ayan and said, "Let's begin with thoughts." For the next few minutes, they simply talked about what Ayan usually says to himself during uncertain moments. Not big, complex ideas, just simple inner dialogues. For example, when Ayan has a new idea, what does he hear inside his head? When someone invites him to speak up or take a lead role, what's the first sentence that arises in his mind? Ayan shared without embellishing. Sometimes it's something like, "What if you say the wrong thing?" Or, "You're not ready yet." Other times it's, "Let someone else take the lead, it's safer." Rafiq didn't correct him. He just asked, "Where do you think that voice was first formed?" Ayan thought about it. "Maybe from school," he said. "I remember once giving the wrong answer in front of the class and everyone laughed." After that, "I always tried to be invisible during lessons." Rafiq nodded again. Writing down the phrase, "trying to be invisible," became a habit of safety. They didn't analyze the memory too deeply. That wasn't the goal. They just noted it. Not everything needs to be dissected. Some things only need to be recognized. Next, Rafiq moved on to the second heading, habits. "Let's talk about your daily patterns," he said. "Not the big ones, just the ones you repeat without noticing. The ones that shape your mood, your attention, and your energy." Ayan began listing some of his regular behaviors. He wakes up late often, checks his phone as the first thing, skips breakfast sometimes, delays replies to messages, avoids making calls that require uncomfortable decisions, and usually ends his day with videos that distract more than educate. Again, Rafiq didn't criticize. He simply asked, "Which one of these habits do you think feeds your hesitation the most?" Ayan answered without much pause, "Probably the phone in the morning. It starts the day in a scattered way. I feel reactive instead of grounded." Rafiq wrote, "First hour shapes first emotion." "That's a good place to begin then," Rafiq sighed. "We don't need to remove all habits. Just notice one that is keeping hesitation alive. When you change even one small daily ritual, your mind learns that action is safe again." Ayan looked at the notebook, now starting to see how his hesitation wasn't just a flaw, it was a pattern. A quiet, learned rhythm of thought and behavior. Then Rafiq turned to the final heading, environment. "This one is often ignored," he said. "But your surroundings shape more than you realize. Let's look at where you spend your time, what you hear often, and who you're around." Ayan began describing his environment. He mostly stayed home, worked remotely, and interacted with only a small group of people. Most conversations were either shallow or focused on tasks. He didn't have many friends who talked about growth or asked deeper questions. The space around him was quiet, but not always nourishing. Rafiq nodded and said, "Silence is good, but silence without intention becomes stagnation." He wrote in the notebook, "Environment should reflect the direction, not the past." What's one small way you could change your environment, not by moving houses, but by shifting something in your space or routine? Ayan thought carefully. "Maybe I could start spending time at a co-working space twice a week, just to feel some movement and energy around me." "That's a good start," Rafiq said. Again, not dramatic, just directional. He closed the notebook halfway and said, "The point of this wasn't to solve you. It was to help you see that what you call weakness is not a core truth. It's a result of repeated thoughts, habits, and environments. And the good thing about those three is they can be gently edited." Ayan didn't feel overwhelmed. In fact, he felt lighter. No one had tried to motivate him with hype. No one had said, "Just be confident." Instead, Rafiq had calmly mapped the roots of hesitation without making Ayan feel broken or behind. People often think their hesitation is a personality trait, Rafiq continued, but it's not. It's a reflection of safety strategies that were never updated. Ayan smiled lightly. He appreciated how practical everything felt, not vague or spiritual, just quiet and usable. They sat there for another few minutes in silence. Not awkward silence, but restful silence, the kind that follows a meaningful pause. The notebook remained open. "No conclusions? Just awareness." And then, softly, Rafiq said, "The 23 minutes are not about breakthrough. They're about alignment. Once you see your patterns clearly, they stop having quiet power over you. Ayan nodded. The fog, as Rafik had called it, wasn't gone yet, but it had started to thin. He didn't feel fixed. He felt understood that he thought, was already a form of progress. Clearing the noise, expanded version. The pages in Rafik's notebook remained open on the table, though neither of them looked at it anymore. There was nothing new to add. At that moment, no need to rush into more lists, more explanations, or more insights. Ayan sat quietly, his hands folded gently in front of him, his shoulders more relaxed than before. Something had shifted, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet softening of the atmosphere. It wasn't a feeling of having arrived at answers, but rather the feeling that the fog around his hesitation was no longer as thick. Rafik looked out the window and then said, almost casually, let's take a short walk. Ayan glanced toward the notebook, unsure if they were finished with it. But Rafik had already stood up, not hurriedly, just naturally, as if the next part of the conversation didn't require a desk. Without protest or question, Ayan followed him out of the library. Outside, the day remained calm. The air was still mild, and the light filtered through the leaves of the trees in a soft, scattered way. There was a park just across the road. From the library, small and quiet, with a few benches, a paved walking path, and trees planted at even distances. Ayan had passed by it many times, but rarely went inside. It felt like a place meant for families, elderly people, or those who had more time than tasks. But now, walking into it with Rafik felt natural, like continuing a conversation without words. They walked slowly, no rush, no destination. The gravel underfoot made a soft crunching sound. Children played in the distance, their laughter light and distant enough to add color to the silence without breaking it. Ayan glanced at the people around the park, a man reading a newspaper. Under a tree, a woman pushing a stroller along the path, two teenagers sitting on a bench sharing a snack. Normal life unfolding at a slow and human pace. Rafik didn't speak for the first few minutes. He just walked beside Ayan, looking around quietly, breathing in the air like someone who wasn't just passing through the park, but actually arriving in it. Then, as they reached a bend in the path, he gently asked, "What do you notice right now?" Ayan looked around. "It's peaceful," he said. "There's no pressure here." "Good," Rafik nodded. "That's the first thing, too. Recognize. Environments have moods even when people don't speak. This place is slow, steady, and unhurried. And it affects how you feel inside without asking permission." Ayan thought about that. He had never really considered how much the surroundings could shape the mind, not by force but by atmosphere. He realized that, in many spaces he spent time in, the pace was different, faster, more crowded, more goal-driven. Even when he was alone, he was still inside that fast pace because his phone, computer, or calendar always reminded him of what he hadn't done yet. They walked past a bench where a young couple sat in silence, holding hands and not looking at their phones, and past a small tree with a wooden plaque at its base, planted in memory of peace. The words caught Ayan's attention. "Tell me something," Rafik said after a while. "When you hesitate, is it usually because of what others might think, or because you're not sure of yourself?" Ayan considered the question carefully. "It's more about what others might think. I don't want to appear foolish, or out of place, or weak," Rafik nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's try something simple." He stopped walking and looked around. A few meters ahead there were two empty benches. One was in the shade, partly hidden under a tree. The other was in the open, closer to the walking path where others would pass by more frequently. "Which one would you usually choose to sit on?" Rafik asked. Ayan pointed to the shaded bench. "That one. It's quieter, less visible." "And if I asked you to sit on the other one instead, what comes to your mind?" Ayan smiled slightly, as if caught. "That people might look at me. Why would that be a problem?" "I don't know. Maybe I'd look awkward, or like I'm waiting for someone, or like I'm trying too hard to look calm." Rafik raised his eyebrows gently. "So even sitting on a bench becomes a stage for imagined judgment?" Ayan nodded, not defensively, but with honest recognition. "Okay," Rafik said, walking ahead. Then let's do a small experiment. You'll sit on that open bench. Not because you're trying to defeat fear, but because you're gently teaching your mind that being seen is not dangerous. Ayan hesitated for a second, then walked over and sat down. The bench was warm under the sun, the light resting on his shoulders. At first he looked down. Then he slowly allowed himself to look up, straight ahead, breathing slowly. No one was watching him. A couple walked by without even glancing his way. A man on a bicycle passed in the other direction, focused on the path. "Do you feel unsafe?" Rafik asked. "No," Ayan said. "I feel noticed, but not judged." "Good," Rafik replied, sitting on the bench beside him. This is how hesitation begins to dissolve, not by forcing confidence, but by creating small experiences where your fear doesn't come true. They sat there for a while, letting the simplicity of the moment do its quiet work. There was no lesson being preached, no advice being handed out, just a lived experience of sitting in the light, being visible, and realizing that nothing bad was happening. Rafik reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pen. "You can carry this if you want," he said, handing it to Ayan. "What's special about it?" "Nothing," Rafik replied. "But it's something real from this moment. A marker of the time when you chose not to hide. Even if it's small, it's real." Ayan took the pen and put it in his pocket. It wasn't a trophy, just a reminder. They stood up and began walking again, this time toward the quieter side of the park. The path there was lined with flowering plants, nothing fancy, just basic, well-maintained bush with white and purple petals. The kind of ordinary beauty people walk past without noticing. Many people think they need to become fearless to stop hesitating, Rafik said. But really, they just need to stop feeding fear with the wrong environments. "What do you mean by that?" Ayan asked. "I mean, your mind is always listening to noise, to silence, to signals around you. If you spend your days in places that are filled with comparison, urgency, and overstimulation, your hesitation will grow quietly. Even if you read good advice or want to change, your environment will keep whispering the opposite." Ayan nodded slowly. It made sense. In his room at home, his laptop was always open. Notifications constantly arrived. Social media showed people doing amazing things all the time. His workspace was cluttered with reminders of tasks he hadn't done. The walls didn't speak, but somehow the space did. "Today," Rafik continued, "you sat on a bench in the open. You walked in a space where you didn't control the atmosphere, and you saw that nothing collapsed. That's the kind of evidence your mind needs, not lectures, just calm moments of disproving old beliefs." They walked in silence again, this time without needing to fill the space with talk. Ayan noticed how different the trees looked now. He had seen them before, but now they felt more detailed, like he had slowed down enough to actually notice them as they neared the exit of the park. Rafik turned to Ayan and said, "You don't need to change everything. You just need to insert small truths into your day, truths that show you it's safe to be seen, safe to act, safe to trust your voice." And felt the words not as advice, but as something he already knew deep down and had just forgotten. He realized that the walk in the park wasn't about the park, it was about reconnecting to the feeling of simplicity, of being present, of clearing the noise that fills the mind when life becomes too mental and not enough experiential. As they stepped outside the gate of the park, the world resumed its usual rhythm. Cars moved, phones buzzed, people walked with purpose. But something in Ayan had slowed down just enough to resist being pulled into the rush. He glanced at Rafik and smiled. "Thank you." Rafik smiled back. "We're not done yet," he said. "But you're already seeing more clearly." "That's enough for now." They began walking back toward the library. And though they had only been gone for maybe 20 minutes, Dan felt like he had returned with a new pair of eyes. The filter of action, expanded version. The walk back to the library was slow and quiet. Ayan's steps were steady, not because he had made a decision to walk slowly, but because his body seemed to match the pace of his thoughts, unhurried, present, and less clouded. Something had changed inside him, even if he couldn't yet name it. He felt more aware of his surroundings, more connected to his breath, and less weighed down by the usual inner noise that accompanied him through the day. Not because anything dramatic had happened, but because someone had simply helped him look at his hesitation without pressure or urgency. When they reached the library steps again, Rafik paused and looked at Ayan. "Do you have time for one more step?" he asked gently. Ayan nodded. Yes. They walked back inside. The building was just as quiet as before. A few readers had left, and a few new faces had arrived. The chairs and tables remained unchanged, and the air still held that gentle scent of paper, old wood, and calm. Ayan felt like he was walking into a familiar room with a slightly new mindset, like someone returning to the same place. But with a different lens, they returned to the same table. The notebook still sat there where they had left it, its pages slightly curled at the edges. Rafik opened it and turned to a new, blank page. At the top, he wrote in simple letters, "Decisions I never made." He slid the notebook toward Ayan. "What's this?" Ayan asked. "This is where we name the choices you've been postponing," Rafik said. "The ones that keep your hesitation alive. We don't need to fix them all today. We just need to see them clearly. Unnamed hesitation grows quietly. But when you name what you've been avoiding, it begins to lose strength." Ayan looked at the blank page. For a moment he felt uncertain. Not afraid, just unsure of where to begin? Rafik didn't interrupt the silence. He simply waited, allowing Ayan the space to think. Slowly, Ayan began writing. His handwriting was neat but small, as if he didn't want to take up too much space on the page. He listed, "Reply to the job offer I received 2 weeks ago. Start the side project I keep thinking about but never begin. End a friendship that feels confusing and emotionally tiring. Join a local writing group I've been watching from a distance. Practice speaking in front of others, even just once." When he finished, he placed the pen down gently and looked at Rafik. "These are the things I think about often," he said. "I don't ignore them. I just pause too long." Rafik read the list quietly. He didn't praise it, and he didn't analyze it. He simply let it be what it was, a list of delayed movements. Then, without saying much, he circled item number 4. Join a local writing group I've been watching from a distance. "Why this one?" Ayan asked. "Because it's the least emotionally heavy," Rafik said. "It doesn't involve breaking ties, career decisions, or deep personal exposure. It's a soft entry into action." Ayan looked at the circled line. He had always liked writing. He journaled often, kept notes on his phone, and wrote quiet poems he never showed anyone. He had once seen a flyer for a small writing group that met every week at a nearby cafe. He even looked up the details online. But when the time came, he never went. Something always pulled him back, usually a sentence in his mind that said, "Not today, maybe next time." "What if they ask you to share?" Rafik interrupted his thoughts gently. "You don't need to go in as a confident speaker or skilled writer. You only need to show up. Sit quietly, listen, let the environment reshape you." He turned the page in the notebook and wrote a new phrase in bold. "Weakness shrinks when hesitation is replaced by movement." "But what if I don't feel ready?" Ayan asked. "No one ever feels ready for change," Rafik replied. "That's the nature of hesitation. It always arrives dressed as logic. It always gives you reasons to delay. But readiness is not a feeling. It's a habit, a rhythm. You become ready by doing, not by thinking." Rafik took a moment, then drew a simple chart in the notebook, a small triangle with 3 sides labeled. "Fear, delay, comfort," he pointed to it. "This is the hesitation loop. You feel fear, so you delay. The delay creates comfort, and comfort feeds more fear. It's a quiet triangle that looks harmless from the outside, but it shapes your days, one small decision at a time." And looked at the drawing. It was simple, but accurate. "So how do you break it?" he asked. "By interrupting one side of the triangle," Rafik said. "Usually the delay. Not by force, not by pushing yourself into discomfort, but by acting just slightly before your fear finishes its sentence." He paused, then added, "You don't need to take the perfect step. You just need to take the next one." Ayan sat with that idea. The next step didn't have to be loud. It didn't have to change his life. It just had to interrupt the loop. And if he could do that once, maybe he could do it again. And again, until hesitation was no longer a natural response, but just a memory of an old rhythm. Rafik then asked, "Can you do one thing today toward that writing group?" Not join it fully, just one step, Ayan thought. I could email them, or even just visit the cafe during their meeting time. Sit nearby, watch. Good, Rafik nodded. Do that not to impress anyone. Just to teach your body that showing up is safe. He closed the notebook slowly, as if sealing the small insights inside, not to protect them, but to give them weight. Then he looked at Ayan and said, "This notebook is yours now." Ayan blinked. "Really?" "Yes, it belongs to you. Not because I'm finished, but because you're ready to continue on your own. Every day use it to notice a pattern, make a small choice, or name a hesitation. Not all at once, just one a day. That's how weakness fades through clarity and consistency." Ayan took the notebook in his hands. It wasn't fancy. The pages were slightly worn, the ink was simple, and the cover was plain. But it felt heavy with meaning. Not because it held advice, but because it now held parts of himself he had avoided looking at for a few moments. They sat in silence again. A calm silence, not filled with thought, but with a kind of quiet understanding that nothing more needed to be said for now. Then Rafik stood up. "I'll leave you with this. Action is not the opposite of fear. It is the antidote to it. You don't need confidence to act. You need action to become confident." He walked toward the exit, his steps as quiet as his presence had always been. Ayan remained seated, the notebook in his lap, the list still fresh in his mind, the triangle still echoing in his thoughts. He didn't feel transformed, but he felt awake, and that for today was enough. The clock doesn't matter, expanded version. The chair across from Ayan was now empty. Rafik had left quietly, just as he had arrived. No handshake, no formal goodbye, no pressure to stay in touch or follow up. Just a calm nod in a line that stayed with Ayan like a gentle breath of wind through still leaves. You don't need confidence to act. You need action to become confident. The notebook now sat on the table, its cover warm from the sunlight streaming through the library window. Ayan ran his fingers lightly across its surface, feeling the indent of the simple ink markings. It was his now, not just in ownership, but in meaning. He didn't feel like someone who had been changed by someone else. He felt like someone who had finally taken the time to notice himself with full attention. The words inside weren't complex. They weren't new to the world. But they were arranged in a way that made them feel real, not as ideas, but as something he could touch, revisit, and actually use. Thoughts, habits, environment, the triangle of hesitation. The simple truth that small steps are more powerful than big plans left undone. All of it was still sitting with him, quiet, gentle. UNMOVN didn't look at his watch. He didn't know exactly how long Rafik had stayed. Whether it had been 23 minutes or 40 or less didn't seem to matter anymore. What mattered was what had happened during that time. And what hadn't happened? No lectures, no life-changing decisions. No forced motivation. No dramatic breakthroughs. Just attention. Real, honest, simple attention, given without judgment and without an agenda. That's what made the fog in his mind begin to lift. Not because someone had solved it for him, but because someone had helped him see it as it was, a series of quiet delays, unexamined voices, and safe patterns that had slowly built themselves into walls. And the only way to dissolve those walls wasn't to crash through them, but to gently stop feeding them. Ayan opened the notebook again. He flipped slowly through the pages. There was the list of the 5 choices he hadn't made yet. There was the triangle of fear, delay, and comfort. There was the circled writing group, the one he had decided to approach gently. There were the headings, thoughts, habits, environment. Each word now felt like a doorway. Not a demand to walk through, but a quiet invitation. And somehow, in the silence of the library, the invitations felt easier to accept. He pulled out his phone. Not to scroll mindlessly or check social media, he opened his email app. He searched for the email from the local writing group that he had bookmarked weeks ago, but never responded to. It was still there, still waiting, still kind. The message didn't demand anything. Just a friendly invitation to drop by on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Ayan didn't overthink it. He didn't write a long reply. He simply typed, "Hi, I'd like to attend this week's meeting just to observe, if that's okay." He read it once. It felt light, safe, honest. Then he hit send. He put the phone down. He didn't expect anything big to happen. But the small action itself felt like a crack of light in the wall of hesitation. Not because he had solved anything, but because he had moved gently and clearly in the direction that mattered. After a while, he stood up and took the notebook with him. He didn't rush. He didn't walk as if he had finally figured life out. He just moved with the kind of steadiness that comes when your mind is no longer full of unfinished thoughts. The feeling wasn't excitement. It was clarity. And clarity, he now realized, was far more useful than motivation. Outside, the day was still quiet. The sun had moved slightly, casting new shadows along the sidewalk. The park across the street still had people in it, but Ayan didn't feel like an observer anymore. He felt like someone who belonged to this quiet world, not just someone watching from behind his hesitation. As he walked home, he thought about the idea of weakness. All his life, he had thought of it as something to be ashamed of, something to hide, something to work on silently until it disappeared. But now, it didn't feel like something shameful. It felt like something misunderstood. Weakness wasn't a flaw in his character. It wasn't proof that he was behind. It wasn't an identity. It was just a rhythm he had gotten used to. Hesitation had taught him to wait. Doubt had taught him to stay silent. And fear had taught him to protect his image at the cost of his voice. But now he had a new rhythm. A softer one. It began with pausing, not out of fear, but out of awareness. It continued with action, not to prove something, but to disrupt the loop. And it grew with each moment of gentle honesty. Back home, Ayan placed the notebook on his desk. The room around him looked the same walls, same desk, same bed. But it felt different now. Not because the room had changed, but because his relationship to it had. It was no longer a place of hiding. It was now a space where he could begin to show up, even if it was quietly, even if it was slowly. He picked up a pen and opened the notebook to the back page. He wrote, "Today, I stopped waiting to feel ready. Today, I showed up anyway. Today, I interrupted the loop." He didn't share it online. He didn't post it as a quote. He just left it there, his own quiet proof that something had shifted. The clock on the wall ticked forward. The hands moved without noise or notice, as they always did. But Ayan wasn't counting minutes anymore. He wasn't measuring progress by how much time had passed. He was measuring it by what had moved inside him and what had stopped holding him back. The next morning, Ayan woke up a little earlier. Not because he forced himself, but because he wanted to. He didn't touch his phone immediately. Instead, he opened the notebook and read through a few pages again. Not for inspiration, just for remembering. He drank water slowly. He made a small breakfast. He looked outside and noticed how the light hit the building across the street. And for the first time in a long time, the day didn't feel like a battle to win. It just felt like a place to be. He didn't feel powerful. He felt clear. He didn't feel bold. He felt honest. He didn't feel fearless. But he knew he could walk forward anyway. That, he now understood, was the real beginning. And maybe that's what Rafiq had meant all along when he said, "Give me 23 minutes, and I will erase your weakness." Because what he had really erased wasn't weakness, it was confusion. And once the confusion cleared, Ayan realized he had always been capable of moving. He had just forgotten that quiet movement counts.